Dr. Andrew, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us. We are very thankful to have you today. And before we move to the panel session, I would like to welcome our final speaker for today. So let me introduce or welcome Dr. Benjamin Bax.
My name is Dr. Ben, and I'll tell you what, I've certainly had an interesting journey with creatine. I started out as a power lifter, and I was competing in 242 to 275 pound class. So my body weight would go between 235 and 255, depending on what class I wanted to, of course, be in the upcoming meet, whatever meet I had scheduled. Typical powerlifting training, 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, following the typical pyramid. Nutrition wise, just eat whatever. Supplement wise, I only utilize two supplements. Of course, just a protein carbohydrate drink and adenosine. I've read about the Russians utilizing that. And so that was my drink of choice. After winning several world titles and national titles, I decided I wanted to transfer over to bodybuilding, sort of a new challenge. How, and in that particular transfer, I began to notice I was losing a lot of strength. And being a natural athlete, I needed something to help offset those losses that I was incurring. And so, long and behold, as fate would have it, I had went to a conference, and at that conference, I was introduced to Dr. Kreider. And Dr. Kreider, he was at Memphis at that particular time. This is back in the 90s. And he had told me about some interesting research that he was doing with a supplement called creatine. Now, I had never heard of creatine, had no idea what it was. And he essentially told me about how it helps to augment and or enhance your intramuscular creatine stores. Now, that certainly, as I began to think about that, could certainly impact my strength and a host of other things. Now, for my non-scientists, just follow my thought process here. The food we're eating, the supplements we're taking in, whether it is some energy drink or protein, carbohydrate drink, etc., the body has to digest it and convert it to a usable form. And that usable form that it converts it to so we can use it as energy is called adenosine triphosphate or ATP. And we roughly have about 80 to 100 grams of this ATP available to us for immediate energy. And meaning, if all of a sudden you got up from your chair and you decided to take a lap around your house, within 1 to 2 seconds, that 80 to 100 grams is gone just like that. And so we have to have more produced in order to sustain energy. So there's an energy system called the ATP PC system that immediately kicks in and begins to produce energy for available use. So how does it do that? We have phosphocreatine available in our muscle, and roughly 95% of the phosphocreatine in the body resides in the muscle, so it's available for immediate energy use. That phosphocreatine is broken down into creatine, and you can see the free energy, but most importantly, ATP. So this is the first system that kicks in to provide us that immediate energy. Again, whether you're running a lap around your house, whether you're playing with your kids, whether you're going to run a marathon, or like me, whether you're going to go into a gym and continue to lift weights, while you're on a restricted diet, meaning I'm not getting all of the carbohydrates and protein that I need because I'm cutting body weight, trying to look a certain way on stage. And so I began to ponder. I said, okay, this could be interesting. So if this particular supplement, creatine, can help enhance our intramuscular creatine stores, i.e., provides more ATP available for use when I need it, that can certainly be a benefit. Think of it this way. We're right now in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. Have you went to the grocery store and you needed an item and you looked on the shelf and it wasn't there? You thought, okay. You go to another store, it's not there. You go to a third store, it's not there. What's the problem? We're having a shortage, of course. You go back a week later, and as fate would have it, they had just stocked the shelves full of this particular item that you need. Do you get just one? No, not if you're like most people around here. You're going to get 2, 3, or however many you need. Why? Because you want that immediate product for use, but you're going to have more stock in your shelf whenever you need it. So think of creatine and that creatine supplementation in that way. You have an opportunity to have more on the shelf, i.e., in your body, to produce ATP whenever you need it. And so as I looked at this, and this was taken from Kreider 2017, in which they did a review, and some of the potential benefits: increased work performed during sets of maximal effort. Okay, for me personally, taking each set to failure, not only to failure, I would do overload sets, meaning whenever I failed, my partner would lift the weight up and I would fight against it to break down those eccentric fibers. I would do strip sets in which they would take the weight off and I would keep going. One set would be essentially 3 to 5 sets because I just kept going, really fatiguing the muscle. That would be beneficial there. Greater training tolerance. Again, I was losing weight. Okay. I was a big, chubby power lifter. I needed to drop some weight. And all of a sudden, training wasn't that fun. But to have that extra source of creatine, of course, would give me greater training tolerance. Enhanced recovery. The ability to recover between sets. Most people, when they work out, they recover, they work out, recover. Interesting tidbit. You have to work out, you have to fully recover, and then you got to allow that opportunity to grow. So having extra creatine availability enables that opportunity. Glycogen synthesis. Of course, glycogen is just stored ATP being utilized by another system that is available. And actually, creatine in the ATP-PC system helps store glycogen for our other systems to use. Increase anaerobic threshold. What does that mean? That means you, or whether you're running, sprints, or lifting weights, you begin to feel that burn, that lactic acid being produced. By increasing anaerobic threshold, it will allow you to go further. So, for instance, if you're able to do, let's say, a 40-yard sprint before you burn out, increasing those intramuscular creatine stores will allow you to, let's say, do 50 yards, 60 yards, etc., depending on the type of training you're doing. Increase work capacity. Combining that with increased muscle mass and strength adaptations during training. So with the enhanced recovery, glycogen storage, work capacity, being able to provide the appropriate stimulus to that muscle fiber to cause hypertrophy, increase muscle mass, and strength will occur. Interesting in here, increase single and repetitive sprint performance. Now, for myself, when I got into bodybuilding, I went from being a power lifter, not doing any aerobics at all, to bodybuilding when I was doing between 2 to 3 hours a day. And sometimes I would do the interval training, very high, very low, for those of you who know about the interval training, and enhance possible aerobic capacity. And so with the available creatine, while I'm doing these aerobic exercises to burn fat, certainly enable me to better tolerate doing high levels of aerobic activity on a very low calorie diet. Now, first article I ever read as it relates to creatine supplementation. So immediately following meeting Dr. Kreider at a conference, I went and pulled one of his articles. And this is the article I pulled. And this was 1998. And they had looked at 28 college football players. And they were consuming 15.75 grams a day of creatine. Variables looking at cycle sprints, bench press volume, bench press, squat, and power clean total volume. They had them on a 4-week program. The results: increase in bench press volume, increase in bench press, squat and power clean total volume, increase in total sprint work, and increase in lean body mass. So I am seeking to get in better shape. I'm seeking to become fit. And, I hear about this supplement from Dr. Kreider at a conference. I go pull this article, I read this result. So what do you think the next thing I do is? Of course, I run down to our general nutrition store and purchase some creatine. So, but that's more of a micro perspective on this supplement creatine and how it particularly impact me. Let's take a macro and look at the greater implications for creatine use. Now, with increased intramuscular phosphocreatine stores, it impacts track sprints, swim sprints, cycling. I have a son who is Chandler, and he's in the 9th grade. He plays football, basketball, and he just had a track meet 2 days ago. So he's doing that to increase his speed for the other sports. And one of the beneficial things that we've certainly noticed is once he started his creatine supplementation, of course, better to increase speed and tolerate repetitive bouts of sprints. Also, basketball, football, field hockey, ice hockey, volleyball. Let's say basketball. For instance, since he plays basketball, one of the things that they do, they run up and down the court, sort of like an interval sprint, interval sprint, interval sprint. And if you ever notice sometimes that there's one particular team and they are going up and down the court real fast, and they have a deep bench and they can bring people off the bench and or they're in great shape, versus the other team, and they're playing great. They're playing evenly about the first quarter, second quarter, and then there's halftime, you get the third quarter, and then you begin to notice something. Their performance begins to fall off. They don't have those extra creatine stores available to produce that ATP. Reduce muscle acidosis. Downhill skiing, water sports, swim events, track meets, combative sports. So not only are we talking about supplying energy, but also decreasing those particular elements that affect our pH level. Because when our pH level begins to drop, i.e., in layman terms, when you begin to feel that burn, the muscle begins to shut down. But if we can reduce the acidosis occurring in the muscle, it will allow you to continue to perform for a longer period of time. Oxidative metabolism, sports, soccer, basketball, team handball, tennis, interval training, volleyball. For these particular sports, soccer is certainly an interesting one, because you can really tap into all of your energy systems. And to have that a supplement that even impacts oxidative metabolism, whether you're involved in soccer and are running a marathon, certainly proves beneficial. Now, I've already touched on bodybuilding and powerlifting, but for those of you involved in Olympic weightlifting, the same principle, providing that immediate ATP. Interesting one, combat sports, wrestling, rugby, track events. There was a coach Ware, and he was a wrestling coach. And one of the things I didn't know, because we don't have wrestling teams here at Mississippi State University, nor in any of our southern schools, SEC schools. But one of the things this particular coach was sharing with me, and he was from the northern part of America, was that wrestlers have to cut a lot of weight, meaning you have to drop sometimes 10, 15 or more pounds and then weigh in order to make a certain class, and then drink that weight and put it back on. And he had shared with me how that he and his particular team would utilize creatine mixed with a glucose drink in order to increase their weight and provide more creatine in the muscle. And he thought his athletes were performing better and had a better winning percentage as a result of creatine supplementation. And I thought that was very interesting. And of course, various track and field events. A question asked to me just last week: which type of creatine is the best? Chelate, hydrochloride, monohydrate, or buffered creatine. There are so many different brands out there. So let's take a deep dive and see which one is indeed the best. Now, this is a position stand taken by ISSN, which they found creatine monohydrate is the most effective ergogenic supplement available. It also, taken over a long period of time, has no detrimental effects on healthy individuals, is the most extensively studied form of creatine, and most important of all, especially to those of us who are no longer competitive athletes and or are conscious of our health, creatine is safe. In a recent publication, and this one should be out in hard print now, from Physio, and this was a 2021, and this is EPUB, but this was looking at the efficacy of alternate forms of creatine supplementation on improving performance and body composition in healthy individuals. They did a systematic review. And so they found that, of course, creatine chelate was approximately per 5 grams, $1.50. Now we're looking at cost. The hydrochloride was $1.10 per 5 grams. Buffered creatine was about $1 per 5 gram serving. And creatine monohydrate was approximately 29 cents. They concluded in their review that creatine monohydrate is the most extensively studied form of creatine that shows efficacy, safety, and the lowest cost to consumers. So from this point forward, the creatine I'm going to focus on is going to be creatine monohydrate. Now, short-term creatine supplementation. Harris in 1992, of course, proposed and looked at a loading phase in which roughly 0.3 grams per kilogram a day or 20 grams a day taken over a 5 to 7 day period would be sufficient to load those creatine stores. And so he found that there was a 20 to 40% increase in intramuscular creatine content, reported 10 to 30% total creatine content increase with no side effects. And so as we look at the literature, Law 2009 looked at the effects of 2 and 5 day loading on creatine, with creatine on muscular strength, anaerobic power in trained athletes. They utilized 17 subjects, consumed 20 grams a day, and on day 1 and 4, did resistance training, took several measurements, and their reported results were an increase in average anaerobic power and an increase in 1 repetition maximum squat. Confirming this, Rico, in a study in 2000, looked at how creatine enhances oxygen uptake and performance during alternating intensity exercise. And in this one now, they use cyclists. So they utilize 14 elite male cyclists, 20 grams a day for 5 days. And they reported that it increased time to exhaustion, increased oxygen consumption, decreased blood ammonia, and decreased plasma uric acid. So positive benefits for different types of athletes being reported thus far. Escardo, 2002, they looked at the effects of creatine supplementation on muscle power, endurance, and sprint performance. And in this one, they utilized handball players, 19 male handball players to be exact. 20 grams a day for 5 days. They reported an increase in counter movement vertical jump, 6 by 15 meter sprints. There's also an increase in body mass and an increase in total average power output values during the bench press and the half squats. And these are for handball players. OPAC in 2002. And this very interesting one here because they looked at the effect of creatine supplementation during recovery from rapid body mass reduction on metabolism and muscle performance in well-trained wrestlers. So they had a group of 5 well-trained wrestlers who lost a significant amount of weight in a 2-day period by manipulating their hydration intake. And then over a 17-hour period, they were given 30 grams of creatine combined with 320 grams of glucose. And what they found was an increase in submaximal work, a decrease in plasma ammonia with no change in blood lactate, blood glucose, plasma urea, and body mass, of course, was stabilized back to the same. Now, that's short-term creatine ingestion, but let's take a look at longer-term creatine ingestion and the effects. And Haltman had proposed, and here we are, an intake following a loading phase of 0.3 grams per kilogram a day, or 2 to 5 grams a day of creatine in order to maintain intramuscular loaded creatine stores. And so we can see here on day 7, following a 6-day loading phase, they had maximized the intramuscular creatine stores. And on day 21 and 35, they had maintained, despite exercise, they had maintained the maximized intramuscular creatine stores. So Ramirez looked at this with females. Creatine is males, females, children, adults. But in this particular study, he looked at the effects of plyometric training and creatine supplementation on maximal intensity exercise and endurance in female soccer players. Utilized 30 amateur female soccer players. The group consumed 20 grams a day for 7 days to load the intramuscular creatine stores, followed by 5 grams a day for 5 weeks. Additionally, they were undergoing a 6-week plyometric training program. And this is what he reported: an increase in vertical jump, an increase in repeated sprinting bouts. There was no effect on total sprint work. So a positive increase was shown in this particular group. Espel, 2001. And this looked at creatine supplementation and how it facilitates the rehabilitation of the disused atrophy and alters the expression of muscle myogenic factors in humans. Looking at a rehab or an atrophy situation, can creatine actually augment performance? In this, they had 22 subjects, 13 males, 9 females. During the mobilization period, no use of that particular of the muscle group, 20 grams a day for 3 weeks. Then 15 grams a day for 3 weeks, 5 grams a day for 7 weeks while they underwent rehabilitative training. And they reported there was an increase in the cross-sectional area of the muscle, an increase in knee torque, and an increase in isometric force. So long story short, even if an individual is rehabbing or if you're recovering from some injury, creatine use has shown to be beneficial. Now, is creatine loading necessary? Commonly asked question I get. And of course, we know if you take in 20 to 30 grams, 5 to 7 days, you can maximize intramuscular creatine stores. Now, if you take in 5 to 7 grams a day, you can maximize those stores over a 30-day period. So depending on where you want to see the immediate impact of creatine supplementation, and or you have a longer window in order to see your intramuscular stores maximized to impact your performance, will determine which particular protocol you follow. Well, let's look at what's reported in the literature here. And this is looking at creatine supplementation combined with resistance training in older men. And this was a 2001 publication. They utilized 30 healthy older males, 0.3 grams per kilogram a day for 5 days, and then 0.7 of a gram per kilogram a day for 11 weeks. So they didn't have the standard loading of creatine that normally occurs. And they underwent an 11-week resistance training program. They reported in older subjects an increase in lean tissue, an increase in leg press, increase in leg extension, increase in muscular endurance, increase in average power with no change in bench press. So Vandenberg, and this is a study from '85, long-term creatine intakes beneficial to muscle performance during resistance training. And this one, they utilized 19 healthy females. So these are not athletic females, just healthy. And they consume 5 grams a day for 4 days of creatine, followed by 2.55 grams a day for a 10-week period, while undergoing an 11-week strength training program. And they found an increase in arm torque, increase in leg press, leg extension, squat, and an increase in lean body mass. There was no change, of course, bench press, leg curl, and shoulder press. So positive benefits for non-athletic population of females. Nutritional considerations. Now, creatine, as is found in our food, mainly from meat. And so we have to have consideration for what about the vegetarians that are in the athletic population or non-athletic population. So this is from a study of Barr, in which they did a review looking at nutritional considerations for vegetarian athletes and different classifications of course, various vegetarian types of diets. Lacto-vegetarian avoids meat, poultry, fish, and other seafood. Your lacto vegetarian, which of course avoids milk and other dairy products, meat, poultry, fish, and other seafood. The vegan, which avoids all animal-derived foods. Macrobiotic, which avoids most animal-derived foods. And this is what they concluded in their review, that vegetarians, of course, have a lower mean muscle creatine concentration, more so than omnivores or meat eaters, which may affect performance. Vegetarians' creatine loading are likely to experience greater performance increments in activities that rely on ATP phosphocreatine system. And finally, the initial muscle creatine concentration vary considerably. It varies among vegetarians, as it does among those of us who consume meat. There's been a lot of interesting studies that vegetarians, when consuming creatine supplementation, can actually enhance their intramuscular creatine stores even more so or equal to that of those of us who consume meat. And this is another interesting story in which they looked at creatine supplementation for vegetarians in comparison, of course, to omnivorous athletes. And this is what they found. This is 2020. Creatine supplementation in vegetarians increased total creatine, phosphocreatine concentrations in the vastus lateralis, the gastrocnemius muscle, plasma, and red blood cells, which often led to levels greater than those in those that eat meat. Also, creatine supplementation increased lean tissue, mass, type 2 fiber area, insulin-like growth factor 1. It increased muscular strength, muscular endurance, power output, and even brain function in vegetarian participants. Studies were mixed on whether creatine supplementation improved exercise and performance in vegetarians to a greater extent when compared to, of course, their meat eaters or omnivorous counterparts. Their overall conclusion is that it is beneficial for vegetarians to consume creatine supplementation. My conclusions, and this is after an extensive paper done with my colleagues that you can find in the Nutrients Journal 2021. And we had looked at over 500 different potential articles and gleaned the following: that creatine supplementation is safe during both short and long-term intervals for both males and females alike, as well as younger and older individuals. And whether creatine supplementation is ingested at 0.3 grams per kilogram a day for 3 to 5 consecutive days, or 20 grams, of course, it will quickly increase intramuscular creatine stores for immediate ergogenic benefits. And a regimen of 3 to 5 grams a day over a 4-week period will also provide that same maximized intramuscular phosphocreatine stores. Creatine supplementation intermixed with carbohydrates and/or carbohydrates and protein appears to be beneficial in increasing intramuscular creatine retention, although there's no really greater benefit when consuming, let's say, creatine with a carbohydrate drink as opposed to properly loading and maintaining your creatine stores. Creatine supplementation appears to provide an ergogenic effect when assessing isolated or individual bouts of peak or maximal force production. Creatine supplementation facilitates more significant improvements in strength and fat-free mass. Creatine supplementation provides benefit during single and repeated sprints and may increase agility and jumping performance. It also appears to provide ergogenic benefits to aerobic endurance bouts with positive physiological adaptations. Creatine supplementation may enhance recovery from intense exercise and possibly provide synergistic benefits during post-injury rehabilitation period. Creatine supplementation may also provide positive benefits to both males and females, athletes and recreational fitness individuals, as well as younger and older individuals. It impacts all populations. And finally, creatine supplementation provides more significant augmentation of intramuscular creatine in vegans due to the initial lower levels of creatine stores, with both vegans and omnivores receiving comparable benefits. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed this creatine presentation.